it really is impossible, because every blessing that we think, within that blessings are an innumerable number of blessings. And then within each of those blessings are an innumerable number of blessings. And so therefore, this state of perplexity is also regarded as a form of ma'rifah, a form of knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's perplexity, or what is called hayra in Arabic, which is a sort of confusion, right? And then there's confusion of the negligent, because they don't understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they don't understand how Allah operates. They don't have the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are led to a state of perplexity, in being, if you can say, flabbergasted, in realizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible to understand, right? And so this perplexity is the essence of the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When a person is led to utter awe, right? And therefore they say, Subhanaka ma khalaqta hada batila. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the pondering over the creation of the heavens and the earth, what does it lead someone to? It leads them to Subhanallah. That, Ya Allah, you did not create this without a purpose. And what is that purpose? Unfortunately, there is no secrets to be unveiled or revealed in the universe. The Prophet ﷺ came to reveal everything. And what is that reality? The reality is the hereafter. That we are living on this earth for a short period of time. We will die, we will be accountable, and then it's heaven or hell. Paradise or hellfire, Jannah or Jahannam. This is the reality of life. And anything and everything that distracts a person from this reality, then they have not come to the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the nature of shaitan is to busy us with information. He knows that human beings like knowledge. And so he busies us with information to distract us from this reality. And the reason the world is in the way it is today is because the people who are carriers of this message have failed to remind those negligent ones of this true reality. If every single believer on the face of the earth had made it known that Allah exists, then atheists and people who deny the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would not have the courage to even open their mouths. In the past, when Islam was in vogue and there was the Islamic Khilafah, they were also atheists, but they kept their mouths. Why? Is because they would not have been able to do anything. And so the only reason kufr raises its head is because Muslims have remained silent and have not reminded people. Recently on a trip with Sheikh Nuh Kala, and he mentioned something amazing. He said the problem, number one problem with the world is what? The number one problem in the world today and in the past, and has always been and will always be, the number one problem in the world is kufr. Not kufr in the sense of we are believers and they are disbelievers. Kufr in the sense of the denial of the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the denial of accountability. When a person does not feel accountable to a higher power, this is why they do what they do. And this is why then the riba system can exist to fund what they do and then cause ifsad and cause corruption on the earth, because there is no accountability. The only thing that brings a person to a moral high ground is the sense of accountability to a higher power, that I will be accountable for my deeds. And if we remind people about this, at the very least what we have done is planted a seed. Because if we don't plant the seed, then people do as they wish. So who is there out in the world today reminding people about the accountability? This is what the prophets came for, right? At the risk of sounding strange, at the risk of being called names, right? And again, we remind ourselves, if we all look into our own selves, the only reason we are not fulfilling this duty is because of a sense of shyness or an inferiority complex about what we have. And so when we say calling and connecting people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it is to remove the state of the denial of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from people's hearts, so that at the very least, even if a person does not believe in Islam, he will at least live as a human being, and he won't harm another. And this is each and every single person's responsibility. Every person who is a Muslim that carries the light of La ilaha illallah in one's heart, this is a duty Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed. And the nature, it is also a trust. And the nature of a trust is that it is given to people whom it is hoped that they will fulfill the trust. But if a trust is given to someone who does not fulfill the trust, what happens? Two things happen. Either the trust is taken away, right? Or other people are then found who will then fulfill the duties. And this is a reminder for ourselves constantly. It's things we keep hearing, but فَذَكِّرْ فَإِنَّ الذِّكْرَ تَنْفَعُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Person needs to remind, because reminder benefits the believers. Continuing with the book إيضاح أسرار علوم المقربين, and each of us take ourselves to account in these past weeks, perhaps when we have not been having public lessons and public adhkar. How were we? What were our states? Did we continue? Some people are only active when there is a public program or there is a set routine, but when we are on our own, that is really who we are, right? When there is no one to push us, when there is no one to take us by the hand, that is whom we are. And acknowledging our weakness, that is why we involve ourselves in the collective. We involve ourselves in the collective because we acknowledge our own weaknesses, and the hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then, out of His infinite mercy, will gaze upon the hearts, which then give a person an impetus to want to then try harder in their own private time. The intentions that people should come to with these gatherings is to hope, at the very least, to find the least amount of determination in their heart, in that a person tries harder than they did in the previous week, or tried harder than they did the day before, right? If anything that comes to a person's mind, as we are even speaking these words, as we are sitting here, everyone, if they go through in their mind, they know what is distracting me from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is it that I am falling short in? And when a person gathers together with the intention to rectify their hearts, Allah puts it in a person's heart that I've got to fix this particular thing up. And that intention and determination that one makes in these types of gatherings, if Allah accepts it, what happens? One then is set on a path in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then will test a person, because every claim of sincerity needs to be tested. And then if Allah sees sincerity, then He lifts it up from a person. Now, we reached page 38 in the book, in which the author was speaking about the trials and punishments that come down, which are a reflection of the states of the believers. And again, the states of the world is a reflection of the states of the hearts of the believers. That is, believers who do not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are dealt with in a different way. But if Muslims are living in a community, then that community is according to the state of the hearts of the believers and the Muslims. And so when we see crime in an area, or when we see immodesty or immorality, a believer never looks beyond and says, how evil the society. He looks at his own heart, right? And our own families, our own units, our own neighborhoods, and our own society. And therefore the society in the world is a reflection of our hearts and the states of our hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and people are taken to account for us falling short in our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Many times there are calamities that descend, perhaps not even on one's own locality, in other parts of the world, but it could be on account of a person in a different part of the world, because the ummah is an entire link. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in infinite wisdom, knows when to send down what tribulation and when to lift it up. And the whole purpose of our regular dhikr coming back is just to clean the slate. Ya Allah, do not take us to account, do not take the ummah to account for our sins, grant us a clean slate. The daily adhkar, the morning and evening adhkar that we ought to do is just there to clean the slate, right? To keep ourselves in a safe space and keep our families in a safe space. And it's very similar to a person who has children and he smokes in a house. He is smoking. not the children, but are the children being harmed? Inevitably, maybe even worse. And this is exactly how sin, right? Sin has a spiritual smoke, if we want to use the terminology, which affects not just those in our surroundings, but it affects the entire ummah, right? And this is the paradigm of the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that evil has appeared only because of what people have earned with their own hands. The only reason of conditions in the world is people's hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nothing else. Everything else is ancillary to that. And this is a reality which we hear about, but it has to be entrenched deeply in our hearts. The conditions of the world is only a reflection of our hearts with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore the first point of correction has to be the correction of people's hearts. In the political arena, we can talk about strategies and we can talk about this and that, but if people's hearts are not trained, irrespective of their affiliations, but if their hearts are not trained in truthfulness, in trustworthiness, in honesty, right, in fulfilling their trusts, in not being tempted by the opposite gender, if this is not in place, then what's going to happen, right, as the author will show us. And so the last sentence of the previous paragraph, the author said, it is mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in one of the revealed scriptures, due to the hypocrite's sin, the city is burnt. Due to the hypocrite's sin, the poor are burnt, which is a reflection of what has been said. What most often causes servants to fall into these calamities is the dishonesty in their hearts and their deeds being tainted by showing off, especially amongst those who profess asceticism and scholarship. If the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the path to sincerity, as we said, is to accuse the nafs of being insincere, then this goes more so for the scholars, and this goes more so for the ulama, and this goes more so for people who have some sort of community leadership or responsibility. And no person can ever reach the point of saying that I have attained to sincerity, because sincerity and ikhlas is a secret between the inner esoteric secret of a person's heart in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning a person himself doesn't even know whether he is sincere or not. The only time a person will know if he is sincere with regards to any deed that he has ever committed, right, or performed, will be on the day of Qiyamah, when the book of deeds are presented to a person. And we know the famous story of Imam Ghazali mentions it in the Bidayatul Hidayah, of how even the angels would want to raise up a person's deeds because they saw it as being sincere, but they were blocked from the second heaven, because the angels of the second heaven were privy to a higher level of sincerity which the angels of the first heaven weren't. And likewise, the angels of the third heaven will then reject the deed, because the angels of the second heaven, it passed them by. Until even the angels of the seven heavens and the Sidratul Muntaha take the deeds up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah says, you were a watcher of his actions, but I was the watcher of his heart, and I know he did not intend me with this action. And so the path is to try and find out for what reason other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are we actually doing our actions. And generally, even when we come back to Allah, or when we take a path to knowledge, and when we take a path to spirituality, generally the intention is either for name, or the intention is for fame, or to get attention, or to show off, or to want to be seen as being someone, right, that has a state with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the same thing would go with knowledge. That is why Imam Shafi'i very, very famously would say, طَلَبْنَا الْعِلْمَ لِغَيْرِ اللَّهِ فَأَبَى الْعِلْمَ أَنْ يَكُونَ إِلَّا لِلَّهِ. We sought knowledge for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but knowledge refused to be except for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, when we learn sincerity, then Allah opened the doors for knowledge. And likewise, when we learn sincerity, Allah opens the heart for spiritual ascension. Meaning we learn sincerity, meaning we learn the sincerity required for that level. But the sincerity for the next level with regards to the level after that is still deficient. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ would say, indeed, I seek the forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than 100 times every day. And some of the people of Allah were perplexed as to what sin did the Prophet ﷺ commit, right? And he saw the Prophet ﷺ in a dream saying that I seek forgiveness from the veils of otherness, not from the veils of sin. Meaning, the high level that he was in, he is still ascending in every breath. And so the next level with regards to the level before that has to be made istighfar from. And likewise, this is why istighfar will never ever ever be left. A person, no matter what stations they reach, they can never leave istighfar. Because when a person goes higher, a person has to make istighfar because they were lower than they were before. Ila ma la nihaya. Right? And likewise unto eternity. Even in the hereafter. Right? There is no. When one ponders over the hereafter and just this one aspect of, in the hereafter we will live forever, eternity, forever and ever and ever and ever. Something that the mind cannot fathom. Just this concept the mind cannot fathom. How then can a person dare to make claims against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's judgment, or try to understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself? If a concept of eternity the mind cannot fathom, what then about the one who himself is the eternal without beginning, right? And eternal without end. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said in his address to the children of Israel, you seek knowledge not for the sake of Allah, and you learn not to act upon it. You strain out of a net from your drink, yet swallow whole mountains of the forbidden. A mosquito falls into the cup and we make a big hullabaloo about it, but we're eating interest and we're deceiving and we're doing people down in their business dealings, right? As Imam Ghazali says, we are so concerned about the specks of dust in other people's eyes, we don't see the whole tree trunk in our own eyes. And there's a form of dim-wittedness and dumbness, which even people of sensory intelligence will be involved in. The guy is very sharp, perhaps in business dealings, but he's deceiving and he's undercutting and he's doing his fellow human being down. And at the end of the year, with that money which is all haram, what does he do? He wants to go for Hajj, right? Or he wants to then sponsor some sort of religious institution, etc. Is this not foolish? But just as we regard that person as being foolish in that particular arena, we are all foolish with regards to many other things, right? In our own private moments, the way we use our devices, the way we treat our spouses, the way we treat our children, right? The way we backbite, the way we lie, the way we gang up against other people because we think, right? And so we are all foolish to some extent. And our Mashaykh is always to advise us, when we read these books and the authors are criticizing a certain people and they talk about the evil people and those who do this and those who do that, we should not look for who are those people in our surroundings, but we should look, who are we? We are those people to the awliya, right? We are those people. We are the people whom the awliya are asked to run away from, to stay away from, not to spend time in our company. Now, you wear the wool of sheep, concealing the nature of wolves within, right? The two-faced nature. And the first level, as we would hear from our mashayikh, of the elect station of the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first step and foundation is that a person's inner state is commensurate with their outer state. There's nothing that a person does in their private moments that they would feel shy that people had privy to. This is the first state with regards to ma'rifah al-khassa, where a person gets to the elect. And beyond that are many, many, many other stations. Right? What is beyond that is that a person's inner state is greater than the outer state. And what we have heard from our mashayikh, meaning that when they do dhikr in public, the nur of the dhikr they do in private is greater than the dhikr that they do in public. And when they read knowledge, and when they give charity, and when they read salah, and everything that they do in public, the nur and the light and the states that they have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their private moments is greater than that. Right? Whereas we, many times, we come to the public gatherings only because if we don't, then we're just spiraling into an abyss. And no matter what a person experiences, what they achieve in the public gatherings as well, if a person does not have that and more in their private quarters and in their private time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we are still only, if you can use the term, on the perimeter. It's still khair, and it's better than not doing anything, right? And so we use the public gatherings sometimes as a crutch. We use the public gatherings as a means of approach. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves the public, and He loves the public gatherings, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that people come together for His sake, that He starts casting into the hearts of people that desire to then want to spend time private. So even if a person wasn't doing it, the hope is that due to the public gatherings, they will start doing it. هُمُ الْقَوْمُ لَا يَشْقَى بِهِمْ جَلِيسُهُمْ. And so we also can't judge people. We can't judge and say, oh, this person's come for a public gathering because, his private time is completely, we don't know. And we have not been made privy over people's hearts. Now, you wear the wool of sheep, concealing the nature of wolves within. Again, this is the nature of the nafs. All the different animals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created, there are signs in that with regards to the nature of our own nufus, the fox and its machinations, right? So all of us are foxes, right? The snake is known for what? What is the snake known for? Right? The tongue, right? That, even the shape of the serpent's tongue, right? Two-tongued, right? So we all have serpents in our heart. The dog, what's the dog known for? For its anger. The pig is known for its shahwa, its desires, right? And so the spiritual form of many people's hearts to the angels and to the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be in the form of a myriad of different animals, right? Therefore, even we would just read over the books of the past, sometimes they would say some of the people of Allah, when they walked into the marketplace, they would put that scarf over their head and they wouldn't be able to even look at people because they would see, right, the states of people's heads either as the different animals depending on the state of their heart. And even if a person doesn't necessarily see that, but the state of the heart is what then affects our relationship in everything that we do, because that is mahallu nazarillah, it is the place of the gaze of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And part of the reformation and refinement of the heart is to bring to mind constantly that this heart is the only thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is concerned about. And this is the place where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking. And to be aware at every point, at every instant, right? Not at every hour, at every instant of the otherness that why I'm doing this for. Right? A person can walk into a room, a person can leave the house. Are we aware of our thoughts and why we are motivated to do certain things? What are the motivations? And generally the motivations to do everything is otherness other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the first step is to be aware of our seeking other than Allah. That's the first step. Until a person starts realizing, as someone said recently in the work, that heart's work is hard work. Right? Heart's work is hard work. You're not going anywhere. You're sitting in the same place, but to constantly just get to this point that, Ya Rab, everything, I don't even have a single instance of sincerity with you. Everything is for other than you. Right? And if we are not realizing the otherness, then there is still a veil. Right? By my might, I swear to afflict you with a trial that will confound the reasoning of the rational and the wisdom of the wise. And this is the punishments that come onto a people because of hypocrisy. Right? When a society lives in a dichotomy between the inner and outer states, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends down tribulations on that society in accordance with those states. Right? People become confused. Guidance becomes hidden. No one knows where the right path is. Everyone is running helter-skelter. Right? Spirituality becomes something far-fetched. Why? Because of this inner hypocrisy. And why? Is because the need to please other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is greater than the need to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A typical example of this is we would find, and we might know of people, and there are many certain circumstances. A couple going through hell. A couple will be going through hell. They're not meant for each other. But they will refuse to go through a divorce. And this is obviously if divorce is the best thing, and divorce might be the best thing for them. But why won't they go through it? And they would prefer to live and make their homes a living hell for themselves and their children. Why? Because of the stigma attached to being divorced, because they are from an affluent family, or their families are known, or they spent so much on their wedding. Their wedding was the wedding of the century, right? And if we look at our society, we would find that the need to please people is indeed, in fact, greater than our need to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because generally the test of sincerity and the test to get to that first point of sincerity is to go against pleasing people, right? And the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would train their nufus, and they would go out of their way to do things to upset people sometimes and to lower their status in people's eyes, just for the sake of training their nafs, to get this out that we have to please people, right? We don't have to please everyone, because people are with you today and tomorrow they are not there. And if a person has a station with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sometimes, and look how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala works, sometimes Allah puts a person into humiliation. He exposes a person for some hidden sin that that person was committing, right? A person was involved in some hidden sin, and Allah is sattar, He doesn't expose a person at the first. If a person is exposed in public, without a doubt, 100%, you can say that this is not the first time that person has committed a sin. Hasha, Allah is too kareem, too generous to expose a person at the first time he commits a sin. When does Allah expose a person? When a person has become negligent, right? But if a person a million times over, right, he's involved in some sin, but deep down he regrets, and then he comes back to Allah, and then he falls into it, but he keeps regretting, even if that goes on forever, Allah will never expose a person. The only time Allah exposes a person is when a person, khalas, they don't give a damn anymore, right? And then they just istirsal, they continue to fall into, and so then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes this person. But then look, the society looks at this person, astaghfirullah, look at what this person has been doing, etc., etc., right? And so society and we fall into su'ul dhan with that person, not realizing that that exposure could have been the greatest mercy for that person. Because what has Allah done in an instant? He's taken away the regard that that person has for people. Because that person regarded people more than Allah, Allah taught the lesson instantly. And the sign of that person's sincerity now is that he continues to try and do what he was doing, but now his intention is for what? It's for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. People will still see him. Unfortunately, this is the nature of people, and they will continue to disparage him because of that sin that he committed. But between him and Allah, now what? He's been sorted out, and he's perhaps even raised now on a higher level than everyone else because he sincerely repented. So even exposure is a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not to expose us, right? And we all have things. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even the Sahaba, some of the Sahaba in the times of after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they would say this to teach a lesson. They would not like to be followed, right? Because naturally there's the crowd mentality, the pop star mentality, the fame mentality. What happens when someone is famous, or when someone is known in a society, or when someone is famous, then naturally people incline. And today, unfortunately, the nature of human beings, we are so fickle that we give regard to fame over everything else. Just because a person is famous on YouTube, right, his opinion has become important in the world for nothing else, just for behaving like a clown, right? And this love for regard in people's hearts, for wanting to be famous, each of us have this as well. And so even in taking the path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to ask ourselves, do I want to be pious just so that I can become famous? Because it's becoming in vogue now to become famous if you can pretend to be pious, right? Or if you can even now speak the language of the deen, or you can speak the language of spirituality. And so deep down we all have this love for wanting to be, right, wanting to be known. And we are all seeking it in the different avenues. A person might be in whatever profession they are doing. Whether we are doctors, lawyers, engineers, politicians, charity workers, students, teachers. In those spheres, we are somehow vying or seeking some sort of prominence in those particular fields. And so the Sahaba, when people would walk behind them, they would tell them, if you knew what I did in my private moments, you would not even look at me. Right? And they would only say that out of bringing these people to account. Some of the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they would see the students following them. And some of them would even, when the Shaykh would take a step, they would take a step in the exact footstep that he took. Right? So if he was walking, and they walked in the exact same footstep. And if he washed his hands, they went and they tried and took the water out. When he read Salah, they tried to stand behind him. They said, my heart has to be inclined with his heart. And when the Shaykh ate, he ran after his leftover food. But this person, the Shaykh knows he's only concerned about what? The outer. And so he asked the Shaykh for a shawl and for a robe and for a turban and for a ring. Right? And he starts wearing exactly the same thing as the Shaykh. Even if the Shaykh wears sunglasses now, he wears sunglasses. Right? Everything that's happening around. And then what does the Shaykh tell him one day? He says, oh my son, even if I took my skin off my body and I made you wear it, it will not benefit you in the least until you correct your heart. Right? And you do the things we are asking you to do with regards to the heart's work between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu also saw a man running after him during his khilafah. Where is Umar? Umar came, Umar went, Umar did this, Umar did that, whatever. And so he wanted to raise his alertness. And he told him, oh so and so, what is wrong with you that I see you with Umar, but I do not see you with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this unlocked the door. This person then realized about the importance of spending private time with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the weeks went by. Sayyidina Umar didn't see him around. One day after a few weeks he saw him. He said, oh so and so, where are you? We don't see you around anymore. He said, Jazakallah khair Umar. I found Allah better than Umar. Right? And so therefore we all have to come back to our private moments with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and take ourselves to account. The muraqabah and the muhasabah, which was a practice which people would do before they sleep every night, even the laying down on the right hand side. A person brings to mind about the time that they will be put in their grave. Right? The hand that one places under their cheek at the time of sleeping also is recalling also in the Shafi'i madhab when they lay the body down, they open the kafan and they open the cheek, and they have a raised brick, and they put the cheek on the raised brick as a form of humbleness, with the hope that this state of humbleness, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show mercy on this. Right? And then the angels come in, they ask, and the answer that is given to the angels on that day is not going to be an intelligent answer, meaning something that we can think about. The heart is going to speak. And on the day of Qiyamah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us, اليوم نختم على أفواههم وتكلمنا أيديهم. Right? The day that we will seal up their tongues and their hands will speak. And so if our hearts were to speak right now, and we were asked, what is most beloved to you? What would our hearts speak? For whom are you doing what you do? What answer would our hearts? And so those questions of who is your Lord, who is your Lord? Right? What have we preferred over Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We spoke about those states. Imam al-Sha'rani says, when we spoke about the states of people that the awliya see, sometimes in animals, he says sometimes the states the people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala see with certain people is that they are prostrating to an idol of gold. Meaning they are running after money in the dunya. He says others, they would see their state as prostrating in front of people, running after status. And wal-iyadu billah, some of them would be prostrating between the legs of a woman, because that is the only concern. Only concern meaning, what is the overpowering nature of the heart? What has taken our heart? Right? And if a person has ever been in a near-death experience, right, or in a Nasallahu salam wal afiyah, the talk of near-death experience is something happens where they say your life flashes between your eyes, right? At that point, only if a person has been in a very sudden, extreme form of fear, right, or shock, what is in the heart then comes out. And therefore, what is really in the heart comes out in two times. If a person at the time of death, you see the true colors of a person, and they say in prison, you see the true colors of a person, right? In prison, because there's nowhere to hide. And on a lesser degree, we can see and we'll know our states if we travel with people, we do business with them, right? And we live with them. If you live with a person, you travel with a person, and you do business with them, then you would to some extent know something about their character. Therefore, the best person to ask about the character of a person, as is always said, is a person's spouse and their children. If a person's spouse and children say, Alhamdulillah, this person is a person of good character, then that testimony is accepted. Again, let's take this concept of hypocrisy. How many of us in our relationships, in our homes, what we are outside is a completely different story inside, right? Is this not exactly what the author is saying, right? You wear the wool of sheep concealing the nature of wolves within. And our mashayikh would always say, if a person's relationship with their spouse, husbands with wives and wives with husbands, is not correct, if they have not reached a state of amicability, respect, tolerance, love, sometimes even for whatever reason, there might not be that love that people, it's like a fantasy they have in their minds, but to the least degree respect, right, and honesty in treating someone who is under our in our household, and the wife being in that position. If a person's relationship with their spouse is not sound, their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never ever be sound. Impossible, right? It is impossible for a person to be at war with their spouse and that their relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sound. The mashayikh would even tell the students, those that, and they would warn them warn them against emotional abuse, right? And they would say, if you treat your wife in a certain way, Allah is going to treat you in that same way. When you most need Allah, right, then you will find the fruit of the way you treated your spouse, or the fruit of the way you treat. They don't have anyone. Who is going to defend? Who can defend a child against a tyrannical parent? Who can defend an oppressed wife against her tyrannical husband? But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees, right? And likewise, vice versa, this goes both ways. Likewise, a person who doesn't use the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives one to approach Him. Sometimes we have opportunities, we have free time, Ramadan has come, right? Or we have this impetus to do good. We fall into negligence, right? What's going to happen is later on, when you want to now approach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what will happen? You will be blocked. Because you weren't sincere when you had the opportunity. You weren't sincere in private. So what's going to happen? You're going to, everything Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created with checks and balances. And even in our relationship with Him, there are checks and balances. And one's relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a reflection of one's relationship with everything else around us. In all circumstances, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala watches over His friends and is gentle with them when His decree descends and punishments are meted out. Meaning the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if they are in a community in which calamities are descending, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still looks after them. For Allah the Exalted has said, it is incumbent upon us to save the believers. وَكَانَ حَقًّا عَلَيْنَا نَصْرُ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, indeed Allah defends those who believe. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُدَافِعُ عَنِ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. Allah defends those who believe. It is also narrated that the Lord, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, said through a divine messenger to one of the children of Israel, a righteous servant beset by hardships, fear not, for Allah is with you. The beloved does not forsake his beloved. Whoever relies on me shall not be demeaned, nor shall he who draws strength from me be weakened. The story is mentioned in one of the chapters of this book. And so, it's almost having this concept of someone's got my back. If you have a friend, right, and he's someone who's powerful, someone who's known in the society, and you've been brought up, he's your best buddy, right, and you're in a situation, you know, I can just call, or he's working in the government, he's got contacts, right, that I know I can rely on, what do we call it? We call backstop, right? The only thing that prevents a person from having this relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah has got my back, is sins, right? Because the nature of sin is that one feels deficient in the relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and naturally it will be impossible to expect from Allah to do for one because one was not doing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the psychology of sin, right? It's impossible to have tawakkul at-tam, complete trust in Allah, if one is involved in habitual sins. Obviously, the sins which a person falls into out of weakness now and then, etc., right? And it requires a higher level of spiritual training, where a person gets to the point where even the sins that we commit, Allah doesn't harm you, right? Nor does our ta'ah benefit you, right? But I am still your servant, and do your bit, or do your part for me. I'm in a situation, I'm in a tribulation, etc. And for this reason, Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu would say that if the heavens and the earth, or if the heavens had to fall down on the earth, almost mutabaq, meaning you take two things, you put one over the other, there's absolutely nothing for a place to go underneath. If the heavens fell on the earth, he says Allah would still make a way out for his believers. وَمَن يَتَّقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَهُ مَخْرَجًا فَذَا مُتَّقِينَ. And so when a person has taqwa and they are cultivating taqwa, then they know against the worst odds, Allah will still find a way out. This is exactly the story of the Quran. All the stories of the prophets in the Quran. Musa alayhi salam, right? At the very, very last moment, Allah doesn't save him a couple of days before, or months before, or weeks before, or hours before. Allah saves him when? At the very last minute, right? And this is how Allah works. And this is how the tests sometimes happen, at the very last minute, right? People see this in movies, at the very last minute something's happening, but that's life. This is how Allah is testing us, right? And we have to be aware that if we have that taqwa with Allah, then at the very last minute. We spoke of a certain person who very quickly he took it upon himself to have complete trust and tawakkul in Allah, that he will not ask, because he read about this great station of tawakkul, he will not ask anyone for anything. And he kept being tested and falling until he took a decision and took an oath that now I will not ask anyone. I would rather die than ask anyone for anything. And so he's walking in a forest one day. He's passing by a path which passes through a forest to go to the next town, and he falls down a well, an old well that was discarded. And as he's falling, what's the natural reaction? He wants to call out, and he remembers his oath to Allah, so he doesn't call out. And his fall was softened because the mud at the bottom, and it was an old well, the water wasn't just sufficient for him to live. And he hears people walking by, he wants to call out. What happens? He remembers his oath, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maghrib comes in, the sun is setting, he feels now what's going to happen, he wants to call out, he remembers his oath. And 2 days go by, now he begins to feel hungry. He's only surviving with a few, and his nafs is constantly calling him to call out, because there are people walking by. All he has to do is call out, someone will hear him and pull him out. And look how Allah is testing him once he took the determined decision to be sincere. And we must realize this, that when we want to be sincere with Allah, Allah will test us, right? But we've got to come to the table, as they say. But come to a table in a sense of that Allah do not test us. But a person asks Allah not to be tested, but a person also has a victor mentality, not a victim mentality, that when they are tested, then be man enough to stand up and face the test, right? So now 3 days go by. He's almost getting weak. Now he realizes perhaps there is an udhr. If a person takes an oath, the Prophet ﷺ, when he saw something better, he broke his oath, and then he fasted, or he gave the expiation. And his mind is still playing games, and now he decides, at that point now when he decides, he says, okay, no, Allah will make a way out for me. What happens? He hears some voices, oh, there's an open well here, someone's going to fall inside, we should bolt it close. And what happens? right? He wants to scream. See, when the instant he took a decision to be sincere, the test became more severe. And now they're bolting it closed with some nails. And he wants to scream and he remembers, right? And now he's sitting and he still hears the voices and he thinks perhaps, right? Because sometimes the resolves that we take are half resolves or three-quarter resolves or 9/10 of the resolve or 9/10 and 9/10 of a resolve. There's not that complete, right? And this is also why we continue to fall into sin, is because we haven't in the deepest depths of our hearts taken the decision to leave it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We still want to play with fire. And so he sits there and then he says, Ya Allah, I would rather die than go against my oath. And I am not going to now turn my back on my oath. I've taken oath not to ask and I'm ready to die. And he puts his head down, waiting for death to come to him. At the instant now he takes that decision, he hears a scraping, a bolt gets thrown over, and he sees a hand being extended. Whose hand is it? It's the hand of the lion of the jungle. And the lion then leads him out of the jungle. The meaning here is Allah then makes everything in the dunya subservient to this person now, who's learned how to make Allah the most important thing. Right? And so this is how we all need to. It's a dangerous thing, because if a person wants to be sincere, we have to try and make a resolve and we have to make a commitment. When you make a commitment, that commitment can only be found to be true or not if we are tested. But we don't want to be tested, so should we not then commit? Right? So it is also narrated, we read that, yes. Therefore, dear brother or sister or reader, understand and become acquainted with your master in times of ease, and he will know you in times of hardship. This was the advice the Prophet ﷺ gave to Sayyidina Ibn Abbas anhu. Now, ittaqillah tajidhu tujahak. Fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and you will find him there for you at every turn. Right? Know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in times of ease, and Allah will know you in times of hardship. For he is compassionate towards his servants, gentle with them, merciful, never forgetting except those who forget him. Allah knows our nature and everything that we are calling ourselves to account for, in terms of our negligence, our insincerity, etc., etc. Allah knows that. And Allah loves that we call ourselves to account and that we disparage ourselves. Right? And we never forget that Allah is merciful, Allah is loving. Right? Our own children, right? A mother, right? What won't she do for her infant child, knowing that the child wants that? So what won't Allah do for us? But Allah knows what is best for us. And sometimes being able to see the difficulties in this world is the essence of mercy. Right? In Tareem, when a person would lose a young child, right, under the age of puberty, they won't say Inna lillahi wa inna ilaihi raji'un. They congratulate him, because they understand in the bigger scheme of things that Allah would not have put this person in a test except because Allah wants to raise their level. The society already is on that level. They understand that this is an expression of Allah choosing this particular person. Right? And the nature of this dunya is that it's an abode of trials and tribulations. The Prophet ﷺ was the most beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he is our example. Was he not put to trial? Was he not put to test? Was he not stoned? Did he not go hungry? Right? Did he not go through the most difficult of circumstances? In fact, the Prophet ﷺ said, no one has experienced fear for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as I have. No one has been put in fear, meaning if we regard any situation that we lived in which we experienced fear, the Prophet ﷺ experienced worse than that for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When the enemies were surrounding his house and they wanted to kill him, and at every point the people of Makkah were out to get him, and they followed them even up to the cave of Thawr. But the Prophet ﷺ obviously had his tawakkul in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so there is no trial and tribulation that any person will ever experience except that the Prophet ﷺ has already experienced it. In fact, he said in a hadith that when one of you are afflicted with any tribulation, then remember remember me. Right? And we will find that every tribulation then becomes nothing in the face of what the Prophet ﷺ went through. It is narrated that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in one of the scriptures, whoever remembers me, I remember him. Whoever forgets me, I forget him. And whoever truly believes in me should rely on me truly, for I am sufficient as a provider and a rewarder. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us anew amongst His special servants, increase our share of goodness, and shield us from misfortunes and calamities through His mercy. Now, the next chapter, the author then starts with regards to intention. And he goes on to the talk about intention, which we will continue in the next lesson. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us tawfiq, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take us by the hand and to allow us to come across everything that we need to enable us to take the path to Him. And we remind ourselves once again, a lot of what is available, even just on an intellectual level, with regards to the approach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, exists in books. One of the biggest mercies that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has had for this ummah is that scholars have written books. And many times there were people of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who even given instruction, either in a dream by the Prophet ﷺ, etc., or other pious people of the past, write about this, right? Write a book about this. Imam al-Haddad was given the specific instruction to only focus all of his work on summarizing the books of Ihya al-Muddin, of the books of Imam al-Ghazali, with regards to the rectification of the heart. Right? And so what we are seeking is not something difficult. It's as simple as finding the books and reading the books. But reading the books with the intention that we are reading it in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because when a person makes the effort to find the book, right, that shows Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are sincere. Right? Otherwise, tawfiq, many times we have these books in our homes or we know about them, but days and months and years can go by and we wouldn't even open these books. And sometimes, even then, when you want to read a book, then we start reading things which are not the priority, or we start reading other things. Right? One of, just recently as well, the Mashaykh also reminding people again of the distractions. Right? The distractions, social media, these phones, etc. Right? And the addictions that we are all falling in. What have we done up to now? And we're constantly hearing about it, we are constantly talking about it. Right? What have we done to rectify the situation in our homes? What have we done to rectify the situation with our own selves, with regards to our ibadah, with regards to the way we're dealing with our spouses, our children, everything that we have mentioned or that has been read for those that are following this book in the past, right? It's a hujjah, it is a proof against us if we have not put into practice at least something of what we have read. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy to practice and to imbibe within us the meanings that I mentioned here. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanakallahu bihamdik. نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Okay, Ismail, you want to say a few words?